We're back here on the set of Rise Up with our beloved brother, Professor Aria Razfar. And as we do here on Rise Up, we like to talk to the different believers around the world when they come here and they visit us here at AROPL Studios. And we like to see how it is that their journey has intertwined with ours, how they have contributed to this call. And Professor Razfar has indeed contributed to this call, to the call of Abdullah Hashim Abu Sadiq. He's done so many things. We were just talking about the award that this book has received, and you as an editor played a great role in that. But this isn't the first time that you've been involved in our activities, and let's go back into the context. Let's see how your journey began. I'm sure the viewers are wondering a bit more about who you are. We'd love to jump into that.
Yeah, so we know that you are a professor of education and linguistics at the University of Illinois. And you are somebody who has always been interested in religion, but the background is what we wanted to explore in particular. Where were you born? Were you raised religiously? Tell us about your upbringing and your background.
Okay, so let's start from where I was born. I was born in New York City. Shout out to the New York Knicks, who are in the Eastern Finals right now. But in 1978, I went on a direct. My family was ready. They had come here as students, and they were ready to move back to Iran to live forever.
Okay.
And I actually flew on a direct Pan Am flight from New York City to Tehran, which is unheard of for the last 40 years.
Right.
And I was in an American school in Iran, actually, for 2 years.
They have American schools in Iran?
They did back then, yeah. It was an American school with other Americans, and all of a sudden one day I saw the Americans were leaving. And I walked into the streets and I saw them with all these Yankee go home signs and burning Uncle Sam effigies. And, I was about 8 years old at this time, maybe 7. I was about seven and a half or so.
Okay.
And I was like very shocked because I considered myself an American. And I saw all these American symbols being burned down, and I was a Yankee fan. So I had a little New York Yankee jacket, and when people would say Yankee go home, I took it very personally. And so then
very tumultuous time in Iran, the revolution.
And to give you some context, I participated in Christmas plays, so I didn't even know what religion I was really at that point.
So your parents were quite, even though they were from Persian background, they were quite open with you exploring different...
Well, I mean, religion wasn't even really a topic.
Okay.
Religion becomes a topic after the revolution happens, and you have the coming of an Islamic Republic, and you have all this anti-Americanism going on, and there's all this stuff happening, and then the war with Saddam begins, and at that point, me and my family were one of the only people who could actually leave because my mom had a green card, and me and my brother were American citizens, so we fly back to first we go to Germany. And because now all the direct flights were canceled, right? And me and my brother were on a Lufthansa airplane going back to the States. This time we went back to Los Angeles, where almost all the Iranians who had any connections, either they were rich business people or people who had some kind of connections, they went to Southern California,
right?
And that's where I grew up from that point on. But one thing I noticed is when I arrived back in Southern California, I was no longer American.
Things change quick, huh?
I mean, the whole climate, this is like 1981 now, so you have to sort of put it in context. During that time, there was the hostage crisis and the embassy takeover, the U.S. embassy takeover. So relations between the U.S. and Iran became flipped overnight. So as a kid going through that, you're sort of just experiencing all this trauma, war and revolution and all these things, and you're trying to make sense of it. You're trying to just be a kid and belong, right? But when I was in Iran, I was getting in physical fights every day because I was American, and then in America I was getting fights because I was Iranian. Right. So
that's such an identity crisis.
So those are two very conflicting, contrasting images. But thank God, over time, I started to find my way. But it was always these deep, burning questions. It was always there. It was like this big monkey on your back that you're trying to make sense of yourself. And so you question a lot of things. You question like a lot of these artificial identities that are being sort of imposed on people.
Yes.
You start to ask the big questions, like, is there a God? And
you're forced to, right?
Yeah, you're forced to ask these questions, right? And I always had this affinity to God, and there's a higher power, and but then when you're seeing all this war and devastation and all this stuff, you start wondering, like, well,
yes,
what's the deal?
The big question of why does evil exist becomes at the forefront of your memory. I mean, I remember when because I was in Iran for the first 6 months when the war with Iraq started, when Saddam invaded Iran, and the streets were filled with all this like passion to defend the nation, and they were invoking religious symbolism, and they were all this stuff was happening. I mean, everyone who was around at that time would know that. So there was this heaviness and this sort of invocation of God.
There was,
and all this. So you had to make sense of all this. Anyone who was in Iran at that time or Iranian could not avoid this issue. Yes. And really, for the first time in Iranian history, you had Iranians leaving Iran. As I told you, my parents did not have an intention to immigrate to the West.
Right. I mean, Iran was a very open, developed society in the time of the Shah before the transition to theocracy under the Ayatollahs.
Yeah, I mean, as a child, I did not even know I was in Iran. Because I was in American schools. I was in an American...
and the environment was open. And
it was open. There was a lot of
jeans
Americans.
And shirts and all that.
Yeah, I mean, looked the same. We had the same cartoons. Batman, Spider-Man.
Yes.
So I didn't feel like I was in a different world, but I did feel I was in a different world when all those when there was a revolution and there was a war. Because even literally when the war started, you couldn't even turn on your lights anymore. You were hearing anti-aircraft missiles all night.
Lights would go out.
You had to go to the basement. There's air raid sirens, all this stuff. So
high stress environment for a child.
High stress for a child, right? And so. That's what war does.
Yeah.
And then you're seeing people your relatives. My uncle was, for example, he got killed in the war.
Oh, goodness, I'm so sorry.
You see the people in your neighborhood going to prison. Everybody was deeply paying a big price. And so I'm watching this. And then even when I came back, my family was still in Iran. So we were always tuned into what's going on there. So
you saw a lot of what's wrong with the world at a very early stage of your life.
Yes, and you have this very raw experience that basically you spend the rest of your life thinking about it. And I remember during this, the crescendo, the revolution, all this, this name kept popping up, the Mahdi.
Yes, of
the
course.
Mahdi was being invoked big time, and so you start asking, who is he? What is he? I mean, my first introduction to religion, I would say, was Christianity, because I was in an American school, and I remember being, as I said earlier, being involved in those like Christmas plays and celebrations, and then also I remember reading the books about Jesus. Jesus was actually the first prophet that I learned about.
That's interesting.
I remember learning about, and I distinctly remember scenes. Like there was this book, and it had a scene of him being, walking with the cross on his back.
Right.
It was like a children's book, and so those were the things that I was being raised on. And all of a sudden, when those schools closed down, I was in a Muslim school, Iranian school, and they were treating me as the other. But only way to belong in there is to now learn about all this Islamic
Please tell
symbology.
me you took your New York Knicks shirt off at this point.
Right, yeah, the New York Knicks shirt, the New York Yankees.
It became very hostile overnight, didn't it?
Yes.
People being lynched in the streets and flags burned and all that stuff.
Exactly. And through my high school years and college years, I'm making sense of this. I'm trying to, they always say in trauma there's 4 stages, right? There's that first stage where you're like shocked, and then and then the second stage is you start to maybe become angry and you start to become defensive, and then the third stage is when you start to barter with it. So I was bartering with these 2 polar opposites. One side is having these slogans out there, death to America, and the other side is, saying F Iran, right? And so you're trying to negotiate your idea between these 2 extremes, right? And so for a period of time, I would, if I would become very, protective of both identities, depending on what context I was in. And so this search for identity, I think, evolved over time. And, you get to college and you start to actually ask some of those questions. You start to look at it more intellectually. You're interacting with diverse people. You're interacting with other Iranians who are going through similar types of experiences, other Muslims. But I would say the majority of Muslims and people from the Middle East, I should say, because it didn't matter what religion you were. If you were from the Middle East, if you looked the part, you pretty much experience the same type of marginalization, the same types of issues. Yeah. So we were all basically in the same boat. And I think in the U.S. we call that people of color. And so early in my college years, I was just like every other Middle Eastern kid. I was doing pre-med like you. You kept doing it like a good Middle Eastern kid.
Pakistan.
Or Southeast Asia.
Yeah. Yes. But my third year is when I decided that I don't need to become another medical doctor.
There's enough of them, right?
There's enough of them, but I wanted to formally...
Thinking of a comeback.
I formally wanted to study these issues of language, identity, culture, politics, ideology.
That resonated with you.
That was something that spoke very deeply to my entire experience. And so that's where I decided to move away from being a biochemistry major in college to moving towards being for 1 year I was sort of just open. And then finally...
You took time. You really did.
Yes. Yeah. I just started taking...
Who knows what would have happened if I took that year sabbatical or something.
I took that. Yeah, my third
Why
year...
Why didn't I do that?
My third year was my majorless year.
Right.
So imagine third year in college, after a whole lifetime of thinking you're going to be a doctor with a big plaque on the wall, a medical doctor and all this, brainwashing.
Brain surgeon.
Yeah. And also I'm in no man's land. I'm in the wilderness.
Wow.
That was my personal wilderness, that third year in college.
And what was it? Was it those echoes of Ya Mahdi, Ya Sahib al-Zaman happening in Iran? Or what was it?
It was probably all of it. I mean, it was just the interaction of faith, religion, identity, all these tensions and...
Big question marks.
And big question marks. You're trying to bring it together because the human being likes to naturally integrate and consolidate who they are. So I needed subject matters that made those questions at the center. So
interesting.
So I became involved in various faith-based communities. I was a big participant in the college political movements. We had a group that was not even officially part of the university. It was called Conscious Students of Color.
Really?
Wow.
And I became one of the leaders of that. And lo and behold, I was one of the leaders of this Chicano studies movement. And the reason I mentioned that is because actually years later, a student approached me to do an interview with me because they were doing their dissertation about that movement.
Yeah. Okay.
At college, it was a movement that gained a lot of notoriety. It was covered by the LA Times. It was something, and that gave me
So was it social issues only, or also religious and other issues?
Religious issues were not overtly part of it, but it's sort of on the sidelines of it because people do things because of their faith. Faith is the big engine that makes people stand up for justice, I think. And it was very clear that the people who were wanted to advocate for justice were driven by a higher calling,
right?
Something beyond their self-interest. And that was something that really appealed to me. I felt like that was something humanity needed to address. I mean, we could no longer just be individual technocrats, going about our work. And so that movement at UCLA at the time, which was a big part of sort of my embracing of my own narrative.
Yeah.
Because I'll tell you this, something that happens when you go through a traumatic experience like revolution, war, and all that, a lot of people will just compartmentalize that episode of their lives. Like I would literally tell people, I was born in New York, I moved to California when I was 9, and I would conveniently leave out
the middle part, what happened
from 78 to 81 when I was in Iran.
Wow. Yeah.
And I would say I did not start talking about those years publicly until probably 2015.
Wow.
Yeah, 2015, 2016, around
That's
that time.
the toll it took on you.
Well, it was just, I didn't know how to talk about it.
Yeah.
It's not an easy topic to talk about, especially when there's no recognition of that experience in any of the public spaces that you're walking through. So most people, I mean, this is not abnormal. I mean, if you look at like Germans in American history, they stopped speaking German. Well, like German was like the second most spoken language in the U.S. And after World War I, and definitely by the end of World War II, the amount of German speakers was almost zero. Because if you were a German speaker, you could, you didn't want to like show that you're German.
Right. Like it had that
at that time. So when the political climate is heavy like that, like I wouldn't want my name would tell people like I'm from somewhere else. But Aria was not really that obvious, but I mean it is.
It is if you know.
Yeah, I mean it's like once they know you're from Iran, they start othering you. So you don't want to. It's just a natural human reaction to sort of like minimize that or altogether eliminate it. Right?
Yeah, that's such a shame, though.
It is a shame, and because that puts stress on you, right? And I've spoken with many. And I found solidarity in other ethnic groups, like African American friends I had. Like they started to say the same thing, like being black in America is very stressful,
right?
And you're not even aware of how stressful it is. It's sort of this monkey on your back that is always there. And I'll give you an example. Like I had a friend in grad school. He was from Chicago. He went to grad school with me in LA, and he said the first time he went to, and he was like the typical African American who has always been in the U.S. But around 2002, he goes to Ghana, and he said that was the first time I felt like a regular human being.
Wow!
And that was the first time I felt like this burden was lifted from me. And I think the same thing happened to me in 1998 when I went to Iran for the first time. And I felt like I was just a regular human being again.
My goodness.
Like my race, my ethnicity, my differentness wasn't a liability. And so there was like this sense of like I'm just a regular human being. And so I liked that feeling. And I would say at that time I began to think of like, well, maybe I should just leave the U.S. altogether and feel like a human being all the time.
But you didn't.
But I didn't, because I felt a responsibility. I felt as I started to grow, so that initial feeling to leave the U.S. was there, but then over time I started to, as I embraced my own narrative and I started to share it, I felt that was something needed.
Right. Like there's a gap it needs to be filled in. There's people like yourself.
Exactly. And I obviously anyone who had that type of experience, I think what I saw in the arrivals and the maker of the arrivals and the people who resonate with the arrivals were people who resonate with that type of narrative.
That's true.
Yeah, that makes you unique in that sense, because there are not many professors of any discipline that would veer into these directions where they would say this is conspiratorial, this is just rubbish, but you always had this broad angle lens. You wanted to explore these various things, and I think it's really, really interesting and fascinating.
That's fascinating, right?
That you came from a country that was almost like my grandparents used to go and holiday in Iran, and they used to say it's like going to any European city pre-revolution. And then what happened afterwards in the name of religion, I mean, this is clearly all playing a part in your journey towards arriving at the doorstep of the Mahdi himself. Yeah, how? I mean, this must have left this question mark. Who is this Mahdi that caused this huge upheaval and flipped the world inside out? Because we know the clerics in Shia Iran, 12 Shia Iran at the time, especially in the war to boost the morale of the soldiers, they would get horses, they would get a white horse and a rider on top of it and go to boost the morale of the soldiers who were fighting the war with Saddam Hussein at the time. They were using these religious symbols in a way. It became a
political thing. Imam Mahdi, the name became political, it became religious. It was something very mysterious that people were using, right, in that time.
Yeah, I mean, religion is a powerful force. Every successful movement, by whatever metric you want to use, has always leveraged religion in some ways. You know, I mean, across the Middle East especially. And so, you know, you have to understand the power of these symbols, you know, this power of invoking, you know, a messianic character, you know, like the Mahdi and things like that. So, but it's not a subject that's easy to talk about publicly, because first of all, it's never really discussed publicly, and even if people want to talk about it, they don't even know how to begin this conversation. So I think that's one of the great contributions of this call and the gospel and things like that, is that it's provided a language, a mechanism to discuss this topic, that there is a God and God has an emissary, and there is a way out of this type of conflict.
Yeah, I wanted to really bring out this point again, Professor, which is that, so, you know, you have this upbringing, you have this background, you encounter this religious extremism of people burning effigies, flags, expressing violence and death towards another culture that you knew to be your own, because you were born in New York, like you said. Now, a lot of people would have used that trauma to distance themselves away from Islam and religion, and Islam in particular.
And people have done that.
And then on the other side seeing this love and brotherhood and, you know, turn the other cheek and the mercy that Jesus came with, and that had an impact on you as well. But even though you felt like an alien growing up in the country that you were born in, because of your background, you never seem to have let go of this aspect that could have been such a source of trauma in most people's lives that they would never want to talk about it again. And I was really interested to see why that was the case. What made you hold on to this kind of Shia Islamic background of your heritage?
Well, I always believed in that there's some type of, that no matter how dark things are, that there's always light. So I've always been sort of someone who can see the light in the midst of chaos and darkness, and always try to have hope. And I think when I looked at all these narratives that were out there, be it Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu, I mean, we've all had friends from all of these traditions, and I would say they were deep friendships, like deep philosophical. And whenever there was an attempt to divide, that was something that bothered me. And I was always looking for a way to unite. And the things that created the forks in the road always bothered me. And I wasn't a big fan of like religious jingoism or, you know, chauvinism. I was looking for something. I knew if there is a God, and it's a just God, and it's a merciful God, and a loving God, then it would be the God of everybody. Yeah. And these religions and these constructions that have sort of been imposed, these regimes of orthodoxy that have been imposed on us, that seek to divide and seek to burn the other down and seek to dismiss, never really fully resonated with me. Now, there is a part of your development where it's just like when you look at like the Black Muslim movement in America, there was a phase when everything black was superior to white, right? And
I think the other extreme.
I think that's like almost a necessary step towards the path of enlightenment, because it's a way for you to
undo some of that trauma.
Yeah, it's a way for you to stand up and negotiate that. So I think there is that process that happens when someone is telling you like you're nothing, or this is bad, or this is evil, and this is that. You have to say, no, you are.
Right, you have to stand up.
So and then you start to negotiate with that and see how can you bring that side in. And I think you know, on a personal level, I've experienced that a lot, especially since 2015, which has only encouraged me to share my narrative more. And that's sort of the healing process.
Yeah.
That's how you reconcile and you bring things together. Like the more I shared those 3 years that I was erasing, and basically not just those 3 years, but all the process of making sense of life since that time, the more I started sharing that, the more I felt people were benefiting from it. They were able to apply it to their own journey and basically heal their own traumas. And I think that's really what this is all about. It's it's all about, like, you know, healing and peace and being able to work through those traumas. But you can't heal those traumas unless you remove the roots of it, which is basically selfishness and the ego and all that type of stuff, which masquerades in these flags and these tribalisms and all these other things. So being able to develop sort of a transcendent worldview, I think was very important. And I think, you know, the path of linguistics and the path of language study, and then and bringing that together with faith and working on the goal of the wise and these types of things sort of help bring all that.
They were your tools of reconciliation.
It's because you have to consolidate who you are. Yeah. And this has helped me consolidate all of it and become a unified person.
Exactly.
Instead of like a compartmentalized person.
So what exactly was that point where you said to yourself, okay, actually I'm a believer now in this call. I know about Abdullah Hashim Abu Sadiq. I understand that the Mahdi has appeared. Because that must have been quite something, just knowing, I mean, after everything you'd gone through, that there's now this individual who's the Qaim of the family of Muhammad. What was that experience like?
Well, I mean, as I said earlier, when I first, I should probably mention this too, because I discovered the arrivals like literally 2 weeks after I came back from my first experience in Mecca.
Okay, wow.
So I went to Mecca in 2007
for Hajj.
Because it was an experience that I had learned about from reading Malcolm X's book, from like reading all these books. It seemed like a space where racism and all these isms are actually dispelled.
Where that healing could take place.
Yeah, I said, let me go see if it is that way. And there were aspects of it that were like that. But one of the things I noticed when I went there was that all the nationalities were separate. Right.
They are. They do this thing.
They didn't really
mingle.
Yeah. They didn't mingle. They didn't talk, and there was actually no spaces for conversation. So the Hajj experience that I had read in the autobiography of Malcolm X, it wasn't there.
He didn't. Yeah.
But I didn't question it to that degree, because that was too much. So I came back, and literally 2 weeks after, one of my friends said, "Hey, there's this documentary series on YouTube. It's called The Arrivals." I started watching it, and I was like, "Oh, so these," because I had not seen that type of conversation publicly since my days at UCLA when I was in those activist circles, and it was like, because the internet was still not.
It wasn't
there.
Almost
when I was
the beginning of YouTube. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
So it was right at the beginning of YouTube, and I said, "Well, there's other people who are, looking at these."
Had you explored Islamic eschatology prior to the arrivals?
No.
So this is really
not
what
really.
started.
I mean, not like. I mean, I was familiar with it. I mean, I was familiar with like
the Mahdi,
that there's a savior figure coming.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I knew that was something that was part of every religion. That somehow God wins in the end.
Yes.
But it was hard to see how. because
Right.
a lot of times either it's crucified or slaughtered on the fields of Karbala
Exactly.
or you know, like it's like, okay, well, I guess we have to just reconcile that the people of God are always like dismissed in their lifetime, and later on some people come around and they celebrate it and assume their mantle and speak on their behalf, and that's the way it goes.
So sad.
But so as I was following this track, and certain things happened, like you had the sign of the death of King Abdullah. You had like then you start to see like there's an unseen now speaking.
Yeah.
And a lot of people
real life markers coming in front of your eyes, right?
Right, they're giving testimony to these things, and one of the things that always attracted me about Islamic eschatology was that Jesus and Muhammad and all these prophets, they all come back.
It's like a unifying.
Right. So but most of the descriptions that you heard sort of publicly were just Jesus and Muhammad. We later learned that there's this thing called the Greater Return.
Yes.
Right? And that means all the messengers and prophets and righteous ones return. So that seemed to be the mechanism through which this unification could happen. And then like the recognition of like Socrates as a prophet, the recognition of Krishna as a prophet, the recognition of, and not just like say he's like a detailed demonstration through various sources that they are prophets of God. And that seemed to me to be a clear path towards unification of the Abrahamic religions on the one hand, the Eastern religions on the other, and everything that sort of has emerged from those. So I could actually see in detail how this unification happens on an intellectual, spiritual level.
And that's something you received through the journey.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But you had to take that first step, that courageous leap of faith to actually embrace the idea that actually the Mahdi is here now, and this is who he is, and these are his people.
Yeah, the first time I reached out, so I was like studying on my own and just following on my own until 2019. And then I finally sent a text message to the studio.
Yeah, that was out of the blue.
Yeah, and then like 2 minutes later, they're like...
Curveball, as they say.
At that point, I had not seen faces to the people who were talking.
Yeah.
And I was like looking for I was literally looking for, is there another professor who thinks like this? Is there another one? I said, you know what? Let's just roll the dice and see what happens, you know? And so, and that's really when the journey became more personal, like, and more embodied, because I started to interact with other people who had subscribed to this. And I think I talked to you for the first time on the phone, and it was like sort of mind-blowing in a way, because like it's like, okay, this is actually happening. Yeah, there's actual people.
Exactly.
It's not theory anymore.
It's a real thing now.
It's
real
actually,
story.
you know, so that was an exciting transition to see the materialization of things.
How long had you been watching the first channel that was launched? Had you been following it from the beginning since 2000?
Yeah, I continuously followed everything. Yeah. And all the different strands and divisions and
true student of faith.
Yeah,
and
yeah, there was all these different forks and all these things that were emerging. So I just kept watching and listening, and the consistent one through all this was Abdullah Hashim Abu Saleh.
Yeah, he's always.
It was very clear to me that his stance is different than the rest of that.
He always stood out amongst
everyone else. He did stand out. And I finally met him in 2021.
Tell us about that. What was that like?
When I came to Sweden, I met...
We remember that.
I remember all you guys. It was actually very surprising, because the image from the satellite channel was sort of more distant. And I saw like just regular people and families and kids running around and jumping up and down, and and the humanity of it was very touching.
The community.
The communal aspect.
What did you think about the community compared to this compartmentalized scene you saw in Hajj?
Great question.
Well, it was not compartmentalized. There was genuine
It was monotheistic.
It was very it was very diverse. People that come from various backgrounds, and there wasn't like that. I felt like these were people who didn't have those same barriers between them, those artificial barriers. That was very clear. And I was there for like maybe a few days, like 3, 4, 5 days maybe. And it was my first personal interaction with the people who had gathered around this.
I would like to know from your standpoint, the fact that you've gone through all this and the fact that you knew about the Mahdi, but you had probably never expected to meet someone who's from the will of Prophet Muhammad, from the 12 Mahdis. Did you ever imagine you'd end up being the editor of his own gospel?
That's an interesting question, because when I was thinking about all these things, and I'm going back to like the late 90s, when I sort of decide, do I want to go in academia? Do I want to just, like, what path should I take? So I said, I knew at the very least I could be an editor.
Subhanallah.
Yeah.
That was sort of the floor. I said, I could do something like that.
Yes.
And because you think about like your unique expertise and your unique role, and everyone has a role to play, right?
Yes.
And everyone has certain talents. I said, well, I probably can't be like the carpenter. I don't have any skills like that, but I know I can edit. Because you probably had this experience as immigrant children. You were always like the English expert for your parents. And you probably did their taxes, and you probably did their accounting and all this. So I had that sense that I could at least do something in English. And actually, when it was revealed that the language of the divine just state is English, I saw that before that, you think there's this natural default position that the language of the divine just state will be Arabic. So I said, well, I know Arabic, but that's not my best language. Always defer to the Arab experts, the Arabic language speaking experts. But then when it became English, I said, now I saw that this process is actually much sooner than.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't see how the Arabic language will become the unifying language in my lifetime.
Yeah, it doesn't really make sense.
But I could see how through English it could become realized in our lifetime, because that's like, it's the most global language right now. And we know prophets always speak the language of the time.
Exactly.
And they use the medium of the time, right? So that was as a linguist, that wasn't strange to me, that I couldn't see a savior figure coming and all of a sudden starting speaking in the Qurayshi Arabic of 1400 years ago. But somehow you try to make that fit, because that's the literalist perspective. But when I saw that there's this English opening, that made a lot of sense to me for this time.
Yeah.
And of course, there's these other languages too. I mean, you saw the multilingual programs, and I used to watch all of them.
Oh wow!
I would watch the Arabic channel. I mean, even.
Let's make this clear for the audience, because I think it's interesting. Now, when you've been following the call for a long time, usually what people tend to do is they sniff their way around. They're trying to find out what's going on. They might send a message, but correct me if I'm wrong. You picked up the phone and you dialed into a live show. Is that correct, or you dialed into a show that was going on at the time when you made your first contact?
I just dialed the studio, and my identity was clear. And I'm easy to find out.
Yes.
You could just Google my name.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We watched some of your talks, by the way.
Yeah, so
a couple of your TED talks.
I said, if I'm gonna, I wasn't gonna like skirt around it that much.
Right, you're gonna jump in head first.
Like, let me just be myself and be authentic. And if it's true, it's true. If it's not, then move on. But I had enough of that belief to accept the consequences either way, and I have not been disappointed.
Alhamdulillah.
Since that point. And
I remember picking you up from the airport when you first landed in Sweden, and we went And then later on, a couple of the brothers gathered, and I remember your first interaction when you first met Abba Sadiq. I remember that Professor Razfar had described this amazing dream as well that happened synchronistically around that time, the brothers were gathered around the fireplace, and we were sharing all these ideas, and I was just like, wow, this is really unique. That somebody who is a well-established professor in the West, he's a professor of linguistics and education, he finds the dawah, he comes from this background, and he believes in the Mahdi, and he wants to know and meet the Mahdi. Yeah. This was, and now we're seeing how this all comes together, isn't it? It's a beautiful journey to the truth, because I think the truth and the unification, these were kind of the drivers behind the steps that you took. And that first interaction with Abba Sadiq, what was that like when you first shook his hand, when you saw his face, when you first engaged with him?
Well, it was a moment in the making. I remember entering into the place that you guys called the Ark.
Yeah.
And everybody was sort of seated in a circle, and I just sat down, and we greeted each other, and then we walked together. It was like two old friends who found each other, and it was as if we had known each other forever.
That's beautiful.
And I think that was really the that experience, and then what came out of that first meeting was this project.
The Goal of the Wise.
That's when he first said that this is about, I said, yeah.
I'd love to actually play that clip for the audience. We have you speaking on the Goal of the Wise right here in our headquarters, and we filmed that, and I wanted to show a quick clip of that to everyone. Let's go ahead and play it.
For centuries, experts of language, rhetoric, and communication have demonstrated how much nonverbal actions and gestures are essential dimensions of communication and thought. When it comes to existing holy scriptures, none of this information is available to later generations. Even if we had access to digital recordings, which we don't, we would still be limited in making sense of these words. 3 years of pandemic life should clearly make us keenly aware of the gaps in digitized interactions and appreciate the importance of social interaction and embodied communication. This gap in communication between God's chosen ones and their adherents has undoubtedly led to uncertainty and confusion amongst the people. A gap that has only increased over time to the point where the original communications, intentions, and meanings have been effectively lost at best and intentionally manipulated for worldly gain at worst.
You are the writer of the foreword of the book. Mm-hmm. That's what you were reading from. And this book changed everything. It changed everything, not just for the believers in this call, but worldwide. It was such a phenomenon. Nations shook, tyrants on their thrones who were looking to arrest our members simply for existing. They were shaken. Let's comment a bit on that, the persecution aspect of what's happened because of this book.
Yeah. Tell us about this aspect, and it's been big in the land of your parents in Iran, where so much persecution has taken place.
Well, I mean, that shouldn't be a surprise for any great work, really. I mean, you look at Socrates, you look at Mani, you look at all these Maimonides, these great figures. Whenever they said what they had to say in their time, they were met with resistance. So book burnings, book bannings, which is something that's actually happening in America right now. This kind of hostility to thought and the freedom of expression is always a tall tale sign that something important is being said.
Yeah.
So I think that confirms. Unfortunately, it does lead to persecution and suffering, and so I think it's necessary for us to speak out against it, and I think we have been. And all the activities that we do with the human rights activists and the professors and this type of work is only helping bring the word of God and the truth higher and higher into people's awareness. So I'm not surprised that there's persecution, because it challenges the very foundation of those regimes of thought, both intellectual regimes and political regimes and all kinds of regimes. And I think when you start to deconstruct those things that have created this type of oppression, those in power are going to naturally want to, their default is to try to preserve their power at whatever cost. So they're trying to bring fear to people and from talking, but it's having the opposite effect.
It is. It really is.
And we only see this growing. And people are starting to pay attention, and they sort of can scan through the disinformation and the allegations and sort of the things that create fear from people pursuing knowledge and pursuing the truth. So anytime something is banned or persecuted or marginalized, that usually is a signal.
Yeah.
Go there.
Big red flag.
Pay attention.
Exactly. It's a signpost.
What's going on there?
It's interesting, right? It's like there's no smoke without fire. I mean, if people are this alarmed by the book, and when we say people, of course, we're talking about, as you said, those who are fearing their power being taken away from them, which is very strange, because this religion, this call, this book, it's a very non-violent movement. It's a very spiritually elevating movement. There's nothing... we're peaceful people. And yet, despite that, we see this crazy kind of backlash from the Iranian regime, from the government in Iraq, from the Malaysian government, and these different governments are attacking our members for just living in their homes even. And it's very strange to us, but it is, as you said, predicted. We can see that this would happen. Historically, it's happened before with prophets and messengers, with their messages. But it is very interesting that The Goal of the Wise, because of its truth, is becoming the most dangerous book in the world. And it's winning awards because of how coherent it is and how academic it is. You actually spoke out and spoke on behalf of some of our members who were persecuted in Iran, where a lot of the persecution has taken place. Really horrific stories have come out of Iran. When it comes to this call, I was hoping to take a look at that as well. We've got Professor Razfar. He came on the news in Iran and spoke on behalf of our members who were persecuted there. Let's go ahead and check that out.
رازفر بیشتر اصلا اگر که در ارتباط با این خبر واقعا جزئیات دیگری دارید من میشنوم. ضمن اینکه دوست دارم اصلا توضیح بدید برای ما که این گروه مذهبی به نام احمدی چه هست، که هستند، آیینشون چه هست؟
خیلی ممنون. سلام و درود بر شما و همه بینندگان. این دین صلح نور احمدی یک دین جدیدی نیست، در واقع یک نهضتی هست که در 2004 در عراق شروع شد و ادعای مهمش اینه که به امام 12 وصلن و یه باورهای جدید و تحریفایی که در اسلام شده رو اومدن تصحیح بکنن و امروز میبینیم که در کشورهایی که به قول معروف اسلامی هستن خیلی از این دیدگاه ها داره باش مبارزه میشه و حساسیت نشون میدن. در الجزایر دیدیم که چند نفر زندان رفتن، الان هم تو ایران دارن بر علیه این گفته های این گروه دارن حرکت میکنن و کلا برمیگرده به اون اصولی که مهم است، اینه که باید آزادی بیان، آزادی فکر، آزادی اندیشه، آزادی باور، آزادی دین باید همیشه برقرار باشه.
و میدونیم که دلیل اینکه حکومت جمهوری اسلامی این افراد رو بازداشت کرده یا به هر حال به هر نوعی باشون داره مخالفت میکنه چه هست؟
بله، تازگی خب میدونین دوباره برمیگردیم به چند تا از نقاط مهم. این گروه باورش اینه که محمد بن حسن که امام 12 شیعیان میشه و در واقع مهدی اسلام هستش این در 2015 ظهور کردن و داره پیام خودش رو منتشر میکنه و اصل موضوع خب خیلی از اعتقاداتی که ایشون دارن و این گروه داره با باورهایی که الان حاکم هستش اختلاف داره. بلخص مثلا ولایت فقیه و اصلا کلا این که مثلا روحانیت باید حکومت بکنن و جزئیات دیگه مثل حجاب اجباری، مثلا حجاب اجباری نباید باشه، مثلا کلا دین نباید اجباری باشه طبق خود آیه قرآن که میگه لا اکراه فی الدین، که دین نباید اصلا اجباری باشه. نقاط دیگه هم هست. یکی از نقاط خیلی جالب برای من شخصا این بود که مثلا تاریخ باستانی ایران رو به تاریخ کنونی وصل میکنه. مثلا فرض کنیم کوروش کبیر پیامبر هست، داریوش پیامبر هست، اردشیرشاه پیامبر هست، زردشت پیامبر هست. اینا رو همه تایید میکنن و این یه چیز جدیدیه که به نظر من ممکنه مثلا رؤسای کشور اسلامی، حالا در این مورد کشور ایران، ممکنه حساسیت داشته باشه نسبت به این نقاط.
سپاسگزارم از شما آریا راسفر، استاد دانشگاه ایلینوی شیکاگو، همراه ما. متشکرم.
So that was a clip from an Iranian satellite television channel, correct? And they were talking about why the persecution in Iran is happening from a religious perspective. What is it about the teachings and theology of the Ahmadi religion of peace and light that is so threatening to the regime? And I think you beautifully highlighted the nonsensical reaction that we're seeing on the ground. For example, mentioning that hijab is not compulsory. And it is based on evidence found in the Quran and things of this nature. The unifying message, the old ancient history of Iran being a monotheistic religion through Prophet Zoroaster. Yeah. And this would make a lot of people, you know, scratch their beards a bit. What is he talking about? What is going on? I want to look into this. So you kind of very cleverly open that door for further exploration of this religion. And I thought it was really well done because they're like, this is a professor in America who has got an academic approach towards looking at this religion. And you know what? I'm really interested by what he's saying. I want to know more.
Exactly.
Yeah, the only thing you didn't do is give the website. That would have been a cool way to finish it off. If you want to learn more,
I'm sure they'll find us.
Yes.
Well, as an academic, you have to maintain some semblance of objectivity, no matter what your personal belief is. So whenever I'm talking to people, I always try to maintain that. But I mean, the points that you highlighted, I think, are very important. And one is there's the sort of the commodification of certain religious symbols. So, for example, the headscarf, that was something that as a child, because overnight, every woman in Iran had to wear a scarf. And so you would think that the scarf is the religion. And that still is being done today. I mean, even in the West, when they want to put out a diversity picture, they put a woman wearing a scarf. So the scarf has become sort of this de facto symbol. And so when you come out and say it's not obligatory, there's this natural reaction to it. It's like, because this is the flag of the religion. This is something that that God has mandated,
yes.
And it's how you distinguish yourself from everybody. So that's number one. So there's sort of this weaponization of the headscarf that's taking place. And then there's with the Iranian context, there's this whole issue of the pre-Islamic prophets of Iran. Because one of the narratives that the last 45 years tried to push forward is that the pre-Islamic culture, the pre-Islamic religion and faith and all these things are invalid.
Right.
And that's a big part of Iranian culture and society. So that's something that, you're forced to choose. So basically every Iranian has to choose. If they want to be like Muslim, then they'll have to choose the last 1400 years. If they want to be Iranian, then they reject all of Islam and they go to
the roots back.
But I mean, it's very hard to access something that's 2,700 years ago, right? And it's just as hard to access something 1,400 years ago if you don't have a continuous connection.
Yes.
So this call, one of the things I was trying to at least invite people to is like, look, there is a way to, in detail, connect the pre-Islamic history of Iran, the spiritual history of Iran, the spiritual legacy of Iran, really, to what happened the last 1,400 years.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and I feel like the goal of the wise, this call, has the tools to do that.
To unify people again.
To unify within yourself, like your
identity.
Your identity. And then obviously the identity then goes from there to global, connecting to other prophets and other civilizations. But now you have a roadmap of connecting yourself.
Yes.
And really that's what the goal of the wise is. It's a way to unify your identity.
Yes.
Across all these different forks and these different turns and, all these places where you're expected to denounce an identity because when you look at Iranian history, it's rich with Zoroastrianism, it's rich with Judaism, it's rich with Christianity, it's rich with, Islam.
And it features prominently in end times eschatology.
Yes. So. But, before we get to the end times, let's go.
How far back you want to go?
Let's go all the way to the beginning and take baby steps forward and reclaim our identity. Because, there's so many forces throughout time, colonial forces, religious fanatic forces that have tried to divide us, give us artificial flags and all these things. And what do we do to feel like we are partners in this divine project? Which these differences were never meant to be divisions.
Exactly.
They were always meant to be ways in which we transcend and unite.
We progress on the journey together. We're not meant to relinquish our previous identity. It's part of the whole, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that's monotheism in action.
Subhanallah.
Right? Yeah. Monotheism goes from being just an idea, an abstract idea, to actually practical methods. So one thing is very clear. When you go to various religious seminaries, they're not really engaging other texts. They're not, for example, Muslims are not reading the Bible.
Right.
They're definitely not reading the Bible in Hebrew, because Hebrew is like the enemy, right? There's not like this is not part of the curriculum, right? And so, or they're definitely not studying Sanskrit. And I think what we're getting from this call is like, look, if you really want to know the story of God, and if you really want to be a godly person, you need to be fluent in all these languages, all the languages that God has spoken, all the messengers through which he spoke through, right? And I think, being able to connect to the Indian religions, being able to connect to the ancient Iranian religions, being able to connect to the Greek religions, the Greek philosophies, and seeing the interconnections has really been a powerful journey, both individually and collectively. And I think anyone who has got that tendency, and I think this is a natural tendency, will resonate with it. Because I think a lot of people intuitively know this. They're just not sure how to do it.
I think there's a lot of power in this unity. And there's a lot of, like you said, we're reclaiming an identity, right? So doing that and actually moving forward together as a collective is so powerful. It's so revolutionary. And it's exactly what we need. We can't heal without this. So it's what we need, but also it's what we need with that individual who can take us on that journey. That present day, modern day messenger. It's not just through the books that we find those connections and we get excited that there might be a coincidence happening.
Absolutely.
It is a fact.
We need a man appointed by God, a man with the Spirit of God. And this is where Abu Sadiq became so pivotal in this journey. And I was fascinated by the way, Iranian religion before Islam came. I found it fascinating that Salman al-Farsi or Salman al-Muhammadi was the one companion about which the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his family said, Salman is from us, the Ahlul Bayt. Right. And I was like, okay, so what is the spiritual legacy of Salman? And the encouragement that the Imams of the Ahl Bayt give to read about the story of Salman, because he was a true seeker and he came from this background of Zoroastrianism, then he became Christian, and that journey from Zoroastrianism to Christianity is a fascinating one, and it's something that Abba Sadiq is revealed to the world. He helped us to see these connections, that which was there, those pieces of the puzzle coming from these different traditions. He made that picture complete. And when we learned that, because I was always thinking, you know, when we did these plays that you mentioned at school, well, in one of those plays I played one of the three wise men.
Right.
Oh, same here.
Right, there you go. And you are taking these gifts and they're from the East. I was like, I wonder if they came from India.
Like
I wonder where in the East are they coming from exactly? And then you learn, well, they were Zoroastrians. And then Abba Sadiq says, well, you know, Zoroaster was a prophet of God. You know who inspired him? A person by the name of Ahura Mazda. Do you know who Ahura Mazda was? The Lord of Wisdom. That was Jesus Christ.
How incredible is this?
And when Abba Sadiq puts all these things for us step by step, you cannot but be overawed that this is one of the three criteria by which to recognize the Mahdi, which is that he comes with knowledge, this beautiful unifying knowledge that brings all of these different cultures that you mentioned, the Greek, Indian, Persian cultures together under one umbrella of Tawheed or monotheism, divine unity. And I think that you must have enjoyed that kind of intellectual journey through the lens of being from an Iranian background or a Persian background, and this journey that led you inevitably to
the couch you're sitting on now.
Well, yeah, remember, I mean, I was at a young age told that being an American and being an Iranian were at war with each other.
Yeah.
So that's the most extreme kind of messaging that not just on me, but people like me were getting. That we had to choose, or we had to not only choose, but like these are incompatible.
Sure. Inner compartmentalization.
So the East and the West were incompatible.
Exactly.
In some ways. And so and that's really the message here, I think, is that how do you bring them together, not just in a sloganeering way, but in a real way, you know, and it does happen through a person, you know, who has the divine spirit, who is living that. I mean, you can see it from this community. Most religious institutions you go to are usually ethnic places.
Right. That's right.
There's only one ethnicity. Rarely do you go to a place where there's people from different languages, different cultures, different backgrounds, different ages. They're all working together, and I think this prototype is emerging. It's actually being realized. It's
functioning well. It's a working prototype.
And I think we're going to have some of the professors who are going to actually study that aspect.
Yes, speaking of that, this was a project that you led, the academic project that brought the dawah, brought the religion into the academic world.
Yeah, that's been a very valuable and personally gratifying effort, was to invite scholars of different religious disciplines, and, you know, who can come and take a look at all these different aspects. We had our first convening in March of 2024. And, you know, at the beginning, I really didn't have any expectations. I didn't know how many would actually answer the invitation. And we ended up having 14 professors come.
It was huge. We can actually show that. Let's put the conference video up and see that that footage of that part of March.
Okay, thank you very much. I just have a few comments to open up our session and sort of set the tone for the next couple of days. And what I really wanted to sort of go over is, you know, why are we here and how we got here? Because I think that's very important. The way this meeting came about was because in May, 104 members of the Ahmadi Religion of Peace and Light were detained at the border of Turkey and Belgium. And as a result, people started to take notice as this case was sort of discussed in the UN and across social media and traditional media as well. People began to ask questions about what is this Ahmadi religion? What is this Ahmadi religion of peace and light? And And so that's when me, Hadil, and Massimo started to have meetings. We started discussing it, and we said, Willie. And Willie, of course. How could I forget Willie? Well, I didn't start talking to Willie. I was talking to you first, and then Willie,
But yes. Willie is the first person who mentioned it to me, the Ahmadi.
Okay, so we have to
give credit to Willie. Credit is
from now on, I will give you the credit. You're the first in the chain of narrations.
Yeah.
So the reason we're here and the reason for this persecution is because we are making bold and big claims. And, with big claims and bold claims comes big scrutiny and big opposition. And the biggest part of that bold claim is that we claim to be the successors of all the prophets. And this bold claim began in 1999 with Ahmad Hassan, who, according to Shia eschatology, is the promised Yamani, which is one of the signs of the end times, apocalyptic times. And it was continued. This bold claim was continued with Abdullah Hashim Abu Sadiq into our current time. And that's where we are today. And so we're here to learn about the 7 sessions are basically thematically organized to deal with all the relevant topics that has caused this persecution and this type of reaction, especially in the Muslim majority lands. And, we also are claiming that we are the Kalki of Buddhism, of Hinduism. We are the Maitreya of Buddhism. We're the Mashiach of Judaism. We are the Messiah of Christianity. And we are the Mahdi of the Muslims. So this is big claims. And as I said, with big claims comes big scrutiny. And that's why we've invited, well-renowned scholars and activists to start to take this matter and examine it and put it out in public and see, what is the validity of it and what grounds does it stand on and so on and so forth.
So that was a very incredible moment for all of us to sit there. 14 professors, you said 14 were there, and they were scrutinizing the religion. They were asking questions. They were reading the book. They were very curious.
Yes.
They were amazed. Tell us more about that.
The scrutiny or the experience?
Both.
Gathering them. Tell us everything.
Yeah. Well, as I said, the gathering, began with the connection to Willie and Massimo.
Can't forget Willie.
Yes.
Can't forget Willie. And he started, we had conversations there because they really became aware of it when the persecution was happening. So the persecution got global attention, and so then naturally what happens is like, why are they being persecuted?
Of course.
Are they like crazy fanatics? What are they all about? And, when you scrutinize what we're about, it actually turns out we're actually the most progressive ideology in the region, that's being persecuted. And so that actually resonates with people in the West who at least overtly espouse being pro-freedom and freedom of expression and freedom of belief. And so from there, I think the first meeting was very productive. That was a chance for them to see the community. We did, there was presentations that were done on different aspects. We covered the idea of the seventh covenant. We covered the persecution, obviously. We covered Plato's Republic.
Yes.
And then we talked about the media. We talked about the medicine of the Mahdi's aspect, which was your presentation. And then we talked about at the end, religion is a man.
Yes.
And that's when they got to experience the community.
Exactly.
They came into the basilica, and I saw how that was, the basilica event was one of the most memorable events.
And people got emotional during that.
Yeah, including the 14 professors.
Yes.
I think
It was intense.
They were visibly, if they started out very distant, they became incredibly moved by the experience.
They felt drawn in. We welcomed them, and they felt it, and we appreciated that they came, and I think they appreciated that we were hospitable.
Yeah, and I should probably mention this. I was in the truck, not the truck, the van afterwards with Eileen Barker, who is, everyone knows who Eileen Barker is. And she compared the experience to the time she met the Queen of England.
Interesting.
Wow, that says a lot, you know.
So, and I know, as an American, I didn't really understand that too much, but I know the Queen is a big deal over here. So
I hear she was,
yes, she was, and I think, and when I asked myself, like, what caused that kind of expression, it was mostly like the humility. It was just because these are people who studied new religions before, and whenever they experienced like the leader of the religion, it was always like this top-down figure.
Yeah.
And they were, I think, blown away by the humility and the humaneness and the communal love that was expressed there.
Hospitality.
The hospitality. And they could see like all the different faces and languages and socioeconomic backgrounds, and everybody had gathered there. So it was a deep and moving moment of sincerity.
Yeah, and our transparency is something we're very proud of. We're very open people. We want to reach out to people. We want them to come in.
Yeah, and I think the transparency and like the reaching out is actually our major strength, because that actually shows that we're not like this exclusive group, or we're like this cult that is trying to
hide from everyone,
hide or separate. In contrast, it's the opposite. So I think this was a big opening at the time, and I think it's led to all these other openings. You know, and I think it's only going to keep moving because the message sells itself.
Yes, exactly. And it's the man behind the message that is attracting people from across the globe, from every background, from different spheres of life. It's amazing. I mean, this is why Professor Razfar is sitting here right now. That's
a spirit of truth. Whenever Sadiq talks, he speaks the truth. And like we said, the unapologetic truth. He's not going to compromise on this aspect. All of his work is out there for free for anyone to access from our website. Every single book, every single sermon, every single thing Abba Sadiq has given to the people for free. Even before, in the time of the arrivals, his only concern was the welfare of mankind. He speaks the same language as, speaking of linguistics, but he did speak the same language that Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad spoke, that Krishna spoke, that Socrates spoke. It's the same language. It's a language of unity, of brotherhood, of peace and prosperity for all, under the stewardship and guidance of the man who has been appointed by God. And this is the main teaching of the religion that Abba Sadiq is promoting. And thank you, Dr. Razfar, Professor Razfar rather, for putting together this opening the door that gives credibility in an academic sense to the very well-researched, well-put-together book that we see here before us, along with the trophy that is definitely very well-placed and matching. And it's certainly a blessing that we've reached this stage. And may the call reach many, many more people. And I hope people found your story inspiring. I certainly did. I think many people learned more about your character. And we hope to have you more on Rise Up.
We really enjoyed speaking to you in person, not just over the screen.
Yes.
And we hope to have you here more often, hopefully. Any last words, any parting words for the people watching?
Thank you for everything that you guys are doing. Thank you for all your efforts and sacrifices. And thanks for having me here today. And God bless you.
God bless you too. Thank you so much, Professor Razfar. That's it for today's show. We'll see you guys again tomorrow morning on Rise Up. And until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.